Hello, in this video I want to talk about what the forms of the perfect tense in New Testament Greek look like. Now I have another video on the functions and the meaning of the perfect tense, and so this one is going to hone in on what it actually looks like. So let's begin. So the perfect tense, as you know probably, if you're watching this video, it reduplicates the front. That is, the consonant on the front of the word gets a little beside itself and it puts an epsilon in the middle. Now, some have often said, why do we say reduplicate? Why not just say duplicate? Because it wasn't duplicated and then reduplicated. It's just duplicating the first time. These are questions that must lead us to ponder the very meaning and essence of life. I don't know. That's just what they say, reduplicate. So, I'm not an innovator. I'm going to go with what they've always said for a long time. So it reduplicates the front if a word begins with a consonant. Now, if a word that you're going to put in the perfect tense begins with a vowel, then you lengthen it. It's kind of like augmenting. Actually, you can't tell the difference between an augment and a reduplication when it comes to a vowel. You just have the context and the nature of the word. You'll just have to figure it out. There's no sure way of distinguishing the two because verbs that begin with a vowel augment by lengthening, and verbs that begin with a vowel reduplicate by lengthening, and that's just the way it is. So, perfect, anything in the perfect tense is going to reduplicate. Now, if it's perfect active, then it's going to put a kappa alpha at the end of the stem. Another train car. Stick that train car in there. This is by the way, the fourth principal part, as I'll remind you in a second. Now, remember that the aorist adds a what? The aorist adds a sigma alpha. The perfect adds a kappa alpha. So distinguish those two in your mind. Okay? So perfect active adds a kappa alpha to the stem. The perfect middle or passive is going to shove the ending right onto the stem with no connecting vowel. Now, the connecting vowels are nice. They're like cartilage. Now, with the perfect middle or passive, we're going to get arthritis. It's going to hurt. There's going to be a crash here. And so often you do get mangling when the perfect middle or passive shoves that ending right onto the stem. Sometimes you get crashes. The reason why luo is used as the paradigm verb is because the upsilon doesn't crash. The upsilon is not a weak vowel like alpha, epsilon, or omicron. Remember, the contract verbs, they crash because those are weak, wimpy little vowels, alphas and epsilons and omicrons. But the upsilon is a strong vowel. It does not crash. It crashes it does not crash with connecting vowels, and it doesn't crash with endings that have shoved right on them. This is why we use a peculiar word like luo as the paradigm verb. So the perfect middle or passive is going to shove the ending right on the stem, and there's going to be some accidents here. Okay, no circumflex accents, by the way. Okay, so just to review the principal parts. Do you remember the song? Luo, luso, elusa, leluca, lelumai, eluthane. So the first principal parts, just to review, that's the present stem. There are two tenses built off the present stem, right? What are they? The present tense, surprising. I know it's surprising, the present tense being built off the present stem. It's innovative, crazy. No, it's not. But what is crazy is that the imperfect tense is also built off of the present stem. It's not really crazy because they both indicate what kind of action? Continuous action, right? And so if you can get in your mind that tense in Greek is not about time primarily, but it's primarily about kind of action, then it makes sense that two tenses that mean continuous action, present tense, the imperfect tense, they would be built off the same stem because they both imply continuous action. Okay, maybe that makes sense. The future adds a sigma, right? And so at least in the active and middle, the future passive, as you remember, is built off the sixth principal part. But the future active just adds a sigma. And then the aorist adds an augment when it's in the indicative and a sigma alpha to the end of the stem. But again, this is just the aorist middle because the sixth principal part is where we get the aorist passive with the theta eta. Okay, hopefully this is all review if you've gotten to this part. So the present stem adds nothing. The future stem adds a sigma. The aorist adds an augment and adds a sigma alpha. Okay? And as I said, the imperfect is built off of this stem. Hopefully this is all review. What is the song? Lu, the principal parts. Lu, o, lu, so, elu, sol, leluca, lelu, my, eleuthane. So these are the last three principal parts. This is the perfect active. This is the perfect middle and passive. And this is the aorist passive stem. So the perfect active, as we've said, reduplicates the front. The first letter gets a little beside itself, and you get an epsilon in the middle, and it adds a kappa alpha. The perfect middle or passive, it reduplicates. First letter gets a little beside itself, and you put an epsilon in the middle, and then you shove the ending right on the stem. Remember the song, Lu, oh my? There's no O here. There's no connecting vowel. The my ending is shoved right onto the stem. And like I said, the upsilon is strong enough to take it. The upsilon is strong enough not to crash into vowels, and it's strong enough not to crash into consonants as well. And then the aorist passive, when it's indicative, adds an augment and adds a theta eta, and then the endings, appropriate endings. So again, perfect reduplicates, the perfect middle or passive reduplicates, the aorist passive augments in the indicative, and then the perfect active adds kappa alpha, perfect middle or passive shows the ending right on the stem, and the aorist passive adds a theta eta. Now, the past perfect is built on these as well. That's the pluperfect, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. The future passive is built on this. The future is not going to have an augment because it's not a past tense. It's going to add a sigma to the theta eta. Okay, there's a little bit of review. Now let's go into more detail. The perfect active. So here we've seen this form, and here I've broken it apart. So we've got reduplication, we've got the basic stem of the word, we've added a kappa alpha, and then men is the ending. Now that alpha, I guess, is a connecting vowel, but I'm going to go ahead and put it as part of the tense suffix, just so that you can see this is the anatomy of these forms. We can think of these as train cars if you want. There's the caboose. Okay, so what does it mean? I have loosed. Now, the aorist can also be translated I have loosed, but there's a difference. What's the difference? Do you remember what's the difference between the aorist and the perfect? That's right. The perfect means I have loosed and I'm still loosed. The perfect has a sense of the result continuing into the present tense. So this form means we have loosed and we're still loosed. So the result has continued into the present. If you were to draw it, you draw a dot with a line continuing to the present. It happened, it was completed, the loosing is done, but the loosing has continued and remained into the present. So that's the connotation of the perfect tense. I have loosed and the result continued. We have loosed and the result continued. Okay? You have loosed and the result continued. Y'all have loosed and the result continued. Now the you here is a you singular. You can have loosed. This is a you plural. You, Greek class, have loosed. And then finally, this is epsilon can take a movable nu here. And so it's either he, she, or it has loosed and the result continued to the present, or they have loosed and the result continued to the present. Now, I believe that this can take more than one form. The C is probably the more common of the forms, I think, but I put both of them here. And now we can see that the endings look an awful lot like the aorist endings. The difference is the aorist has a sigma alpha, the perfect has a kappa alpha, but the endings look much the same. And it loosely relates to the song that goes on esse. So on esse, amen, etta, on, rapam. But it's, like the aorist, it doesn't have a nu here. But this is the first perfect form you learn, so it should be okay. Sigma, we're used to seeing a sigma in the second person singular. Epsilon is a very common third person singular past tense active ending. Now, technically, the perfect tense, technically it's not a past tense because the result continues to the present, but forget that. Men is we know that. Te is y'all, we know that. And then we know either nu or si as a third person plural ending. So you should be okay if you have a photographic memory and remember everything we've done so far. But there you have a sense of what the perfect active looks like. So let's move on to the perfect middle or passive. What does it look like? Well, it's going to, again, if we break it apart, it's got reduplication, absolutely. There's the basic stem, but notice there's no connecting vowel. It's going to shove the ending right onto the stem. So you may know the song, Lu o my, lu e lu et tai, lu o metha, but there's no o my and there's no o metha. It's just my and it's just metha, and it's shoved right on the word. And upsilon is strong enough to take it. But there will be other places, I have a slide coming, where you get a crash here, a crash of not a crash of culture, not a crash of civilization, but a crash of endings. Anyway, into the stem. Okay, so how do we translate it? I have been loosed. So it's been because it's passive, and have because it's perfect. And again, the sense is, I have been loosed and I'm still loosed. The result continued. We have been loosed and we're still loosed. Okay, the continuing action. Oh, what's going on here? I thought it was lu o mai, lu e, lu et tai. Okay, this is what the real ending is. You may not remember this, but the A of lu e is actually the result of a crash. It was a horrible accident, and a lot of things happened. But this one, you don't have the upsilon is intact. And so basically this is the pristine, the original. We're finding now, we're in the jungle of the perfect middle and passive, and we've come to the darkest recesses of the perfect tense, and we've located the original second person singular ending here, and it's a sigh. Anyway, so the A in luatai has undergone a bunch of crash. But here's what the ending actually is. It's actually my sai tai, my sai tai. These are the original primary middle endings. Okay, how do you translate it? You have been loosed and you're still loosed. Or in the plural, y'all have been loosed and you're still loosed. Again, the result continues. That's intrinsic to the perfect tense. Of course, it could be middle too. I have loosed in my own interest. You have loosed in your own interest, and it's still loosed. That kind of thing. This implies completed action. It happened in the past, and it has remained the case into the present. Okay, and then here is the third person singular. So he, she, or it has been loosed, and then they have been loosed. Okay, so. Any questions? Oh, you can't talk, but you're welcome to type them in YouTube. Okay, so there you have it. Lu o mai, different. Lu e tai, lu o metha, lu es that, lu on tai, ya. Okay, and so reinforces the endings that we've already learned. So now the pluperfect. Now, if your brain is just full, it's kind of like I can't handle it anymore. Please, I'm not listening. You've got the basics, basically. So if you don't really get anything from this point on in the video, don't worry, it'll be okay. I think there are 21 pluperfect active forms in the New Testament. I may be misremembering the number, but there aren't a lot. I mean, there are a lot of words in the New Testament, right? And so to only have 21 pluperfect active forms, it's not really that common. And so if you don't get it, don't worry. But try it. Why not? You might like it. So the difference between the perfect and the pluperfect is had. So if you say I have loosed in the perfect, in the pluperfect you'll say I had loosed. So I had loosed, or we had loosed. Now here's boy, that looks atrocious, but it's not. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? So first of all, the augment, this is the past perfect. Had loosed. I had loosed, and the result continued, and it may not have continued to the present, but it continued for a while. I had loosed the donkey, and then the donkey got caught in the bushes. You know, I had loosed the donkey, and it stayed loosed for a little while, but now it's not loosed anymore. That's the sense of the pluperfect. I had loosed, and the result did continue, you know, but it hasn't continued to the present. So the augment, it's a past tense. It can have an augment. Actually, in the New Testament, the overwhelming majority of those, what is it, 21? The majority, the vast majority of the pluperfect actives in the New Testament do not have an augment. In fact, I think there are only 2 or 3 places, maybe, where the pluperfect actually has the augment. So some grammars don't even put the augment when they're giving this paradigm. So there's the reduplication of the perfect system. There's the basic word. There's the kappa of the perfect active. But notice it has a different connecting vowel. Instead of an alpha for connecting vowel, the pluperfect has epsilon iota as a connecting vowel. So this is your clue right here. The epsilon iota is the clue. And then men, you know men. You know men. Okay, so I had loosed, we had loosed, and the result continued for a while. But now it hasn't. Okay, you had loosed, and the result continued for a while. Or y'all had loosed, and the result continued for a while. He, she, or it had loosed, and the result continued for a while. They had loosed, and the result continued for a while. The endings are on, s, e, amen, eta, honore, son. Okay, so the endings you know. If you can look beyond, there's too many letters here. If you can look beyond that, then the endings you know. On, s, e, amen, eta, honore, son. Okay, all of them have the epsilon iota connecting vowel. Okay, so there's the pluperfect active. Now we are truly in the recesses of the universe. This is, oh, I'm sorry, it's not pluperfect, it's pluperfect. My pluperfect isn't perfect. Ha! Okay, so again, you could have an augment here, although often not. Here's the dissection of the pluperfect Miller passive. It's pretty much the same as the dissection, of that we've seen before. We have reduplication, possibility of an augment because it is a past tense, pluperfect. There's the word, and then the ending is shoved right on the stem. Except the endings are going to be the amen, u, eta, ametha, esthe, anta. It's that set of endings. Except, so this is I had been loosed and I stayed loose for a while. We had been loosed and we stayed loose for a while. Here's, once again, we're going to see what the original ending was. Remember in the song, it's amen, ooh. Well, ooh is the result of a bunch of crash, a bunch of messiness. But now, because we're seeing the pristine form here, the original the original secondary middle form, and it was a so, sigma omicron. That's what was there originally. Again, it only shows up here because of the crashes that have happened in other places. So this is you singular had been loosed and you stayed loose for a while. You plural, y'all had been loosed and you stayed loosed for a while, but probably aren't anymore. And then lastly, toe and untoe. He, she, or it had been loosed and stayed loose for a while. They had been loosed and stayed loose for a while. But again, you can see the song. Amen, different, eta, ametha, esthe, anta. But remember, no connecting vowels because this is the perfect Miller passive, shoved right on the stem. Again, if you don't remember the things I just said, you'll do just fine. These are very rare in the New Testament, very rare. Okay, crashes and such. 2 more slides and we're done. So sometimes the upsilon, again, why did they pick the upsilon? They picked the upsilon because the upsilon doesn't crash with either vowel or consonant. But there are words that do. And so let's take grapho. Grapho means to write. So you can see that the gamma got a little beside itself with an epsilon. So there's reduplication on the front. Got it. The ending has been shoved right on the stem. By the way, when you see that the ending has been shoved right onto the stem like that, there's no oh my, there's no vowel there. You know it's perfect Miller passive. You just know it. You don't even have to look at the front of the word. Once you get, if you start at the end of the word and move back, you've done the ending, and you see there's no connecting vowel here, you know it's perfect Miller passive or pluperfect Miller passive. But you see what I'm saying? Same thing here. When you see that there's no connecting vowel, perfect Miller passive. That's what you should think. Now, grapho has a phi, and so you can see that the phi has assimilated to the mu. The Borg has assimilated the phi. And so this flows. The goal is smooth sound. So instead of gagrafmai, which would be harder to say, it became gagramai. That's easy to say, right? Gagramai. That's nice. Gagramatha. And so this is I have been written and we have been written. Now, here's a crash. The phi crashed into psi and became psi because You know, it's just like a psi or a key. A psi or a xi is the key to hidden sigma. And so the hidden sigma is the psi of the ending. Gegrop psi. Here, the phi, grotho, fit with the theta. That was pleasing. Breathy with breathy. And so you have been written, and the result is continued. You have been written, y'all have been written, and you're still written, which makes no sense, but that's how it would translate. Okay, gegraptai. Here, because tau is tau doesn't have a voice with it, like duh does. So the phi went to its voiceless lip equivalent. So p beta phi go together, one of the stop fraternities. And so the phi became a p. Gegraptai. This is very common in the New Testament, this particular word. It has been written, as it is written in the scripture, which has the sense of it was written, completed, and it stands written. It remains written. It was written, done deal, but it has stayed. It has continued to the present as written, which is a kind of theology of scripture hidden in there. Scripture may have been completed as written in the past, but it stands in force still today. Now, first of all, this is wrong. This should be an epsilon here. It's not a gag reflex here. So it should be gegramenoi, and I didn't put the accent. What's wrong with me? This is called a periphrastic construction. You may know what a periphrastic is. Periphrastic is a form of the verb to be. And boy, this is wrong. I'm wrong. No, it's right. Okay, it's okay. But that should be an epsilon right there. So this literally says, they are having been written. This is a participle. This is one way to make a perfect passive. They have been written. And the reason why, basically the crash was just too much to handle. And so instead of coming up with some crazy crash, Greek will often defer to this periphrastic way of saying they have been written. And again, this should be an epsilon here. They are having been written, they have been written. So there's more than one way to skin a Greek verb. Okay, so crashes happen. Just be aware of it. You don't have to have it all memorized. But you know, a psi or a xi is the key to hidden sigma. Sometimes if this begins with a palatal, if the stem ends with a palatal, like ago, ga, ga, then it'll go to a key here. But anyway, okay, moving right along. The future perfect. There are allegedly only 6 examples of this, and I frankly have only found 4 examples of this in 2 verses, and they're both in Matthew. And so let me go ahead and put this up here. The future perfect is it will have been written, or he will have been loosed, or it will have been loosed. The one I have that isn't in bracket is practically taken from Matthew 16:19 and Matthew 18 something. These are the verses that say, whatever you bound on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will have been bound on earth, or will have been bound in heaven. And so the way to make a will have been in Greek is to do the will be. These are all periphlastics. Will be having been loosed. This would be he will be having been loosed, because it has a masculine ending. In Matthew, it's it will have been loosed, and so it's on to match the it neuter. So the ending is either going to be singular or plural on the participle. You know these endings, os and oi. It's going to match the gender of the subject, and it's going to be either singular or plural depending on the subject, but they're all going to be nominative. The participles are all going to be nominative to match the subject, because the verb ame is like an equal sign when it comes to case. And so the participles are going to be nominative. This is the future of ame. Esomai, esi, essa, estai. I made mistakes. Esamatha. This should be esamatha. Esestha, esontai. I'm not going to remake the video. I'm sorry. I've got to go to chapel. So these are not forms that occur in the New Testament anyway. But it's he will be having been loosed, which we kind of put it into our Greek computer, and it comes out, he will have been loosed. And the idea is, at some point in the future, when he is loosed, he will have already been loosed before then. And that loosing will have continued into the point in the future. I think the way to illustrate this is, when Jesus when Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead, he authorized a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that the church does that Jesus has authorized. Of course, in Matthew 16 and Matthew 18, Jesus is authorizing it right then, I think. Jesus right then is binding and loosing anything that the church does in his name in the future. He did it. It's already a done deal. It's completed. See it? Completed action with the result continuing. So at any time that, let's say that the church believes, let's say that my local church says, I believe the Lord is calling us to plant a church. Well, if we bind ourselves to plant a church now, it's already been bound in heaven because Jesus bound it when he was in his earthly ministry. It has already been bound. So it's completed. He bound it back in his ministry, and it's continued to be bound until this point now when we have bound it on earth or loosed it on earth. So it will have been bound because it's, whatever, it will have been bound. Or let's say that I'm going to build a house, but I have to get a permit. So I will have been authorized to build the house by the time I build the house. I will have been authorized because at some point in the future, I will get a permit and that will authorize me, and then I will build the house. I hope that made sense. Once you get it, it's not that hard. I'm just having trouble explaining it. Well, I think I'm going to go to chapel. And this has been the perfect system and the various forms thereof. And so we continue on our journey through this language we call Koine New Testament Greek.